The two of them sees that Kusan knows they're passed inside out, became even more shocked. All they could do was a nod. Kusan continued, Go Sheng and Yang Zizhen were both rebels before going over to the government side to fight for the Great Sung Empire. So both of them have stolen from the thief that is the government. So tell me, are you two going to accept my presents or not? Yang Taizhen thought to himself, if I refuse, then it will surely offend him. So he took the presents from Kusan's hands and said, We are very grateful for this. Thanks. Kusan was pleased by this. He picked up the bundle and put it back onto his back. Turning around he said, Time to go home. The three of them walked side by side out of the woods. Kusan said, Caught a couple of prize pieces tonight, got 2 paintings by Emperor Daojun, and a sheet of his writing showing off his calligraphy as well. This fellow is no emperor, but his red-green plume and thin gold form are indeed supreme in the world. The other 2 men had no idea what in the world red-green plume or thin gold form is, so all they did was a nod in agreement. After walking for a while, Yang Taizhen spoke up, Earlier today you said that half of our Great Sung's land is lost in the hands of Emperor Daojun. So what is so good about his paintings or writings? Why would brother you go through such troubles and taking such a big risk to go to the royal palace to steal it? Kusan smiled, This is something that I guess you just don't understand. Go Zhaojian spoke up as well, If Emperor Daojun can be so good at painting and writing, he must be pretty smart. Pity that he does not concentrate on being a good ruler. When I was little my dad told me that a person, no matter what he does, must concentrate on doing one thing. If he tries to learn a little bit here, do something there, in the end he will get nothing accomplished. Kusan answered, For a normal person, this is true. But in this world there is someone who is a genius at everything. From language to kung fu. Including writing, painting, music, and go. From math to military tactics. Even medicine, astrology, and the 5 elements. There is not a thing that he does not understand, not a thing that he does not excel in. It's just that you guys won't ever meet him. He looked up at the waning moon, and let out a long sigh. Under the moonlight, Go Zhaojian and Yang Taizhen suddenly noticed tears on Kusan's face. When the 2 of them got home, they buried the 2 golden objects deep within their backyard, not even telling their wives about this. After that night the 2 of them acted as if nothing happened, living off their farm and whatever they catch when there is a spare time they practice their kung fu. Even when by themselves, neither one of them ever brought what happened that night up. The 2 of them still visit the little wine shop occasionally for a couple kettles of wine. Kusan still served the wine along with some peas, peanuts, and other snacks that helps the wine to go down. Afterward, he always goes and sits down by the door and goes into his own little world, lost in his thoughts. It was as if that night had never happened. The only difference is that when Go Zhaojian and Yang Taizhen look at Kusan, their eyes are filled with respect. Autumn slowly gave way to winter, the days just kept getting colder and colder. One night, with the cold north winds blowing, it started to snow. The day after that it continued to snow even more. The whole sky is filled with snowflakes and the ground looks like it's covered with precious jade, white as far as the eye can see. Yang Taizhen told his wife that tonight he is going to get some wine and food so that they can invite his brother and his wife over so all of them can have a nice dinner and enjoy the snow. After lunch, he grabbed 2 big bottle gourd and went off to the wine shop to get some wine. When he got there, he noticed that the door is shut tight, even the wine shop sign is taken down. Yang Taizhen knocked on the door a couple of times and shouted, Brother Kusan, I'm here to buy 3 kilos of wine. No response came. After waiting a bit, he called out again and still no response came. He walked over to a window and looked inside. Everything in the room is covered in a thick layer of dust. He thought to himself, Haven came in several days. Turns out that Kusan hasn't been here for several days as well. Hope nothing happened. So he had to brave the blizzard and walk to the wine shop 2.5 kilometers away in Red Plum Village to get the wine as well as a chicken. When he got back, he killed the chicken and gave it to his wife to take care of the rest. His wife's surname is Bao, given name is Zairuo. She's the daughter of the teacher at the private school in Red Plum Village. They have been married for a little under 2 years now. She puts the chicken along with some cabbage, bean curd, and vermicelli made from bean starch into a big pot. While the pot is boiling on top of a fire, she cut a plate of cured meat and cured fish. At dusk, she went over and invited the Goes over for some wine and enjoy the snow. Go Zhaojian happily came over. His wife Li is not feeling very well in the last couple of days because of her pregnancy, throwing up anything she eats, so she decided not to come over. Li's given name is Ping. She and Bao Zairuo are like sisters, and the two of them chatted for a long time. Only after making her a pot of tea did she finally return home. When she got back, she saw that the two men have already moved the charcoal stove onto the table to keep the wine warm. The two of them has already started. Go Zhaojian said, "Sister, we weren't patient enough to wait for you. Please come and join us." The two men have always gotten along, both are also men of character. Add that to the fact that in the country nobody really cares about all the rules regarding men and women meeting. So Bao Zairuo smiled and nodded, putting some more charcoal onto the stove. She picked up another cup for the wine and sat down beside her husband. She notices that there are hints of anger on both men's faces. She smiled and asked, "Something the matter again? What's gotten the two of you so angry?" Yang Taizin answered, "We were just talking about the asshole that goes on in the imperial court in Linan." Go Zhaojian added, "I was at the Joyful Rain Pavilion, the tea house at the head of the Tranquility Bridge yesterday when I heard some people talking about the bastard Chancellor Hanzu. Didn't sound like he was making this stuff up either. He says that no matter which official is filing a report, if the report does not have the words, 'Also present whatever' to Chancellor, this bastard Chancellor does not even give the report another glance." Yang Taizin sighed, "When you have this kind of emperor, you'll get this kind of chancellor. When you have this kind of chancellor, then you'll get this kind of official." Big Brother Huang that lives outside of Gushing Gold Gate of Linan told me this story. One day he was cutting trees for firewood at the side of the mountain when he suddenly saw a whole bunch of soldiers protecting a crowd of officials coming his way. Turns out that Chancellor Hanzu was taking a sightseeing trip with all his underlings. He kept on minding his own business and went on cutting his trees. Suddenly he heard that Hanzu sigh and say, "The bamboo fences and a thatched cottage here really do make an extraordinary country scene. Pity, it's missing the sounds of chickens crowing and dogs barking." Pretty soon after he said this, there suddenly came barking from the bushes. Bao Zairuo laughed a little, "This little dog really do know how to please." Yang Taizin answered, "It sure does." After barking for a bit, it jumped out of the bushes. "What kind of dog do you suppose it was?" Turns out it was our dignified and honorable magistrate of the city of Linan, His Excellency Zhao. Bao Zairuo doubled over with laughter. Go Zhaojian observed, "This little dog act by His Excellency Zhao has probably ensured that he would be promoted very quickly." Yang Taizin answered, "Of course, it's only natural." The three of them drank for a while. The snow outside is coming down even harder, but with some wine in their bellies, all three of them felt very warm and cozy. Suddenly, from the east, there came footsteps on the road. The footsteps were very rapid. The three of them looked over and saw a Taoist priest. The Taoist priest is wearing a bamboo hat and a cape, but snow is all over his body. There is a sword on his back. The yellow thread hanging off the handle of the sword swung back and forth in the wind. Snow filled the sky, the lonely figure walking in the snow, such a grand and gallant scene. Go Zhaojian spoke up, "This Taoist knows quite a bit of kung fu, looks like a real man of honor." Yang Taizin replied, "Thought's right. Let's invite him in for a couple of drinks and make friends with him." Both of them always loved to make new friends, so they both stood up and stepped outside. They noticed that the Taoist is already past them by more than 20 yards even though he is only walking. Such levels of Qigong is rarely heard of in the world. The two of them looked at each other in astonishment. Yang Taizin yelled out, "Father, please stop." The Taoist turned around and nodded at Yang Taizin. Yang Taizin continued, "Such kind of weather outside, Father, why don't you come and drink a couple of cups to warm up?" The Taoist sneered and in an instant arrived in front of them. Face full of disdain, he asked coldly, "Want me to stop? What for? Be frank and tell me." Yang Taizin thought the Taoist's rudeness was completely uncalled for, so he just lowered his head and didn't bother to answer. Go Zhaotian cupped his fist and replied, "The two of us were just sitting by the fire keeping warm and drinking wine when we saw Father walking alone in the snow. So we boldly asked if Father to join us. Please forgive us for our offenses." The Taoist rolled his eyes and said rather loudly, all right. If you want to drink then let's drink." And he walked through the door. This made Yang Taizin even angrier. He grabbed the Taoist's left wrist, and with a pull, he shouted, "Still haven't asked as to how to address Father." Suddenly he felt as if he was grabbing onto a slippery fish rather than a hand as a Taoist's hand escaped his grasp. He knew he was in trouble and tried to back away, but before he could, a pain shot through his wrist as a Taoist grabbed his wrist. It was as if he is cuffed. Feeling both enormous pressure and heat, he hurriedly tried to struggle out of the Taoist's grasp. But his entire right arm felt lifeless and weak, with his wrist in great pain. Go Zhaotian knew his adopted brother is getting the worst of it from his blood-red face. He just wanted to make an acquaintance and wanted to avoid offending the Taoist, or anyone in the martial world for that matter. So he spoke up, "Father, please sit here." The Taoist sneered a couple of times more and let go of Yang Taizin. He walked to the center of the room and sat down in a rather ostentatious manner before saying, "The two of you are obviously from Shandong, yet are here pretending to be farmers. Pity that your accents are still obviously of Shandong dialect. Why would a peasant know any kung fu anyway?" Yang Taizin felt both embarrassed and angry as he walked into the back room. He took out a small dagger from the drawer and hid it in this shirt before walking back out again. He poured out 3 cups of wine and toasted one for himself, all the while not saying a word. That Taoist just stared at the snow outside of the house with a sneer on his face, not drinking any wine nor saying anything. From the hostility on the Taoist's face, Go Zhaotian figured that he is suspicious of any trickery in the wine. So he took the cup of wine in front of the Taoist and drank it. Then he said, "Wine gets cold very quickly. Father, let me get another warm one for you." He poured another cup for the Taoist, which the Taoist drank down in one gulp. Afterward, the Taoist said, "Even if there are knockout drugs in the wine, it won't get to me." Yang Taizin finally had about all he can take. "We nicely invited you to come and have a drink with us. Why would we try to harm you? If you plan to keep talking in such a manner, then please leave now. It's not like we had sour wine and rotten food that we can't get rid of." The Taoist ignored him and grabbed the wine bottle. Pouring and drinking, he downed 3 cups in a row. Then he suddenly took off his bamboo hat and cape and threw them on the ground. Go Zhaotian and Yang Taizin looked him over carefully. The Taoist is about 30 or so, squared face with slanted eyebrows and a hint of redness. His eyes were bright and piercing. Next, he untied the leather bundle on his back and threw it on the table. Immediately, Go Zhaotian and Yang Taizin jumped up. Because from the leather bundle rolled out a bloody human head. Bao Ziruo screamed in fear and ran into the back room. Yang Taizin felt his chest to make sure the dagger is in place. The Taoist gave the leather bundle a shake and 2 more bloody objects fell out, a heart and liver. From the looks of them, they are probably not pig's heart and pig's liver but very likely to be human. Yang Taizin shouted, "Taoist bastard!" as he took out the dagger and thrust it towards the Taoist's chest. The Taoist snickered, Eagle Talon. So you want to fight now? He lightly hit Yang Taizin's wrist with his left hand. Yang Taizin felt a numbing pain in his wrist as his fingers lost all their strength. Before he knew it, his dagger has already been taken away. Gou Zhaotian was just shocked to see all this. He knows that his adopted brother is the descendant of a renowned hero and his family's kung fu is slightly superior from his own from their daily sparring. But it was as if he was nothing in front of this Taoist. The move that he just pulled off was obviously bare-hand seizes blade, a skill that he has only heard of in the martial world. He immediately picked up a wooden bench that he was sitting on, waiting to block the dagger when the Taoist inevitably stabs back at his adopted brother. But the Taoist completely ignored them. He just wildly cut the human heart and liver to pieces with the dagger. Suddenly, he let out a huge roar, so loud that it rattled the tiles on the roof. He lifted up his right hand and brought it down hard, so hard that the contents on the table all jumped at the impact. The two men looked over and saw he had just smashed the head into smithereens. Even the middle of the table was cracked. The two of them were still recovering when the Taoist shouted, "Shameless scoundrels, today I will have to break the no-killing rule big time." Yang Taizin couldn't be any angrier. He grabbed the iron spear that was leaning against the corner of the room and jumped outside. He shouted back, "Come on! Let's teach you a lesson in the art of the Yang family spear." The Taoist snickered a bit. "You think you are worthy enough to use the Yang family spear based on all this fake bravado?" He walked out the door as he was finishing the sentence. Seeing the situation has deteriorated to this point, Gou Zhaotian ran back to his house and got his double halberds. When he got back, the Taoist was still standing there with his sword still in the sheath and his sleeves flapped noisily in the wind. Yang Taizin yelled out, "Unsheath your sword." The Taoist replied, "Even if the two of you come at me together, I would still fight you with my bare hands." Yang Taizin made a gesture signaling he is about to start and followed it with a poisonous dragon coming out from the cave. The red tassel on his spear shook, creating a huge flash of red heading towards the heart of the Taoist. The Taoist was briefly surprised and praised, "Excellent." His body went along with the spear and dodged to the left. His left palm spun around and came up to meet the spearhead in an attempt to grab it. Yang Taizin has worked hard with this spear since he was a little kid and fully received his father's skills. Yang family spear is nothing to scoff at. Back then, Yang Zhaizin took a spear and 300 Song soldiers into battle against 40,000 Jin soldiers at Little Merchant Bridge. In the battle, they killed more than 2,000 Jin soldiers, not to mention more than 100 officials. Actually, the Jin arrows came flying in like rain. As soon as he was hit by an arrow, he would break the wood part off and keep on fighting. At last, his horse got tripped up in mud and he finally gave his life for his country. When the Jin army burned his body, the amount of melted metal from the arrowheads topped an amazing 2 liters. This battle shocked and scared the Jin army and made Yang family spear famous in all of China. Although Yang Taizin is not as great as his forefathers, he does almost fully understand the spear skill inside out. So there he is, parrying, thrusting, swinging, flicking, blocking, fending, and obstructing. The point of the spear flashes silver, the tassel emits red. What a spear skill! Yang Taizin pulled out all the stops. The moves were swift and agile, changing and faking as if they were an illusion. But the Taoist's body followed the spear around, easily dodging forward and back, making him almost impossible to hit. After using all 72 moves of the Yang family spear, Yang Taizin couldn't help but get anxious and upset. He turned around and walked away carrying the spear backward. As expected, the Taoist started to chase very close behind. Yang Taizin let out a big shout, grabbed the spear with both hands, suddenly twisted his waist and extended his arms, and thrust the spear back right at the Taoist's face. This move was ferocious, for it is the move in Yang family spear that is used to break enemy formation and kill enemy generals, called return horse spear. Back before Yang Zizin surrendered over to the Sung army while he battled Yue Fei, he used this exact move to kill Yue Fei's younger brother Yue Fan. The Taoist sees that the spear has already arrived in front of him in an instant, couldn't help but praise, "Excellent move." Smacking his hands together, he was able to clamp onto the spear point. Yang Taizin gave one mighty push, but the spear did not move at all. Shocked, he tried with all his might to pull the spear back. But it seemed as if the spear is caught underneath a mountain, no chance at all of pulling it out. His face had turned red as he tried 3 times more, but the spear still would not leave the Taoist's hands. The Taoist let out a hearty laugh. Suddenly his right palm came up and with the speed of a lightning, struck the handle of the spear. Yang Taizin felt the part between the base of his thumb and index finger go numb and immediately released the spear, letting it drop onto the snow-covered ground. The Taoist smiled and said, "You are really using Yang family spear. Sorry for any offense. Please honor me with knowing your surname." Yang Taizin still hasn't recovered from the shock of all this, so he replied without much thought, "My surname is Yang, given name is Taizin." The Taoist asked, "Are you related to General Yang, Yang Zizin?" Yang Taizin answered, "Is my great-great-grandfather." The Taoist cupped his fist and saluted, "I mistook the two of you for scoundrels. Turns out that you are descendants of patriots. Please forgive me. May I be so bold as to ask this gentleman's surname?" Go Zhaotian answered, "Surname is Go, given name is Zhaotian." Yang Taizin added, "Is my martial brother. He is the descendant of Go Sheng, one of the heroes of the water margins of Mount Liang." The Taoist replied, "Your humble Taoist acted rashly and rudely. Please forgive me." Then he saluted again. Go Zhaotian and Yang Taizin both cupped their fist and saluted back, "No problem at all. Would father please come in for 3 more drinks?" Yang Taizin conveniently picked up his spear as well. The Taoist smiled and said, "Of course. I just got the urge to drink it up with you too." Bao Zirua was worried that her husband might get hurt, so she stood in the doorway anxiously observing. Seeing the 3 of them stopped fighting and became friends, she felt greatly relieved and started to set the table back. After the 3 of them all sat down, Go Zhaotian and Yang Taizin asked the Taoist for his Taoist name. The Taoist replied, "My name is Qiuchuji." Yang Taizin jumped up and shouted, "Aya!" Go Zhaotian was shocked as well, "Man of Eternal Spring Chang Chunzi?" Qiuchuji smiled and replied, "That's the name that my Taoist friends gave me. I do not dare to claim such a name." Go Zhaotian replied, "The hero Man of Eternal Spring of the all-true sect Quanzhen Pai, I am honored to meet your acquaintance." The 2 of them threw themselves onto the floor and saluted. Qiuchuji hurriedly helped them up and said while smiling, "I personally killed a traitor today. The government was chasing me very closely, and you 2 gentlemen suddenly invited me in for a drink. This is the capital and neither of you is normal farmers, so I became suspicious." Go Zhaotian replied, "This martial brother of mine always had a temper. When we entered he tried a hand at father, that probably furthered father's suspicion." Qiuchuji agreed, "How could a normal farmer be that strong? I thought that you 2 gentlemen were dogs of the government who were waiting here undercover for me. So that's why I was so rude, too rash and rude." Yang Taizin smiled and replied, "Can't blame those who don't know." The 3 of them laughed heartily. After several rounds of drinks, Qiuchuji pointed at the head that is now in pieces on the floor. "This man's name is Wang Daokun, a traitor. Last year when the emperor sent him to pay respects to the Jin emperor on his birthday, this man actually started to collude with the Jins in their effort to invade the south. I chased him for 10 days before finally getting him." The other 2 men had long heard around the martial world that Man of Eternal Spring Qiuchuji's amazing kung fu and heroic character. Seeing his patriotism at this moment, killing a traitor for the country, they admired him even more. The 2 of them seized the opportunity to ask him some questions about kung fu. Qiuchuji was only too happy to help. Even though Yang family spear never met an enemy on the battlefield, but when going up against a kung fu master, it becomes rather lacking. Although Kyuchuji's inner and outer kung fu cannot be considered at the highest of levels, they are nevertheless at a very high level. How could Yang Taizin last up to more than 10 moves against him? Turns out that Kyuchuji was surprised to see his skills, so he purposely yielded in order to make him use up all 72 moves of Yang family spear to make sure that it is authentic. If they were really going at it, Yang Taizin's spear would have been knocked out of his hand in a few moves. At this point, Kyuchuji observed that Yang family spear was intended to be used on horseback. If used on foot, then one has to be more creative and imaginative and not just use it in a rigid fashion. The two men could not stop nodding upon hearing this. Yang family spear has always been a skill of the Yang males, so although Kyuchuji is very knowledgeable, he still does not fully understand the inner workings of the skill. So he asked a few questions about it to Yang Taizin as well. The three of them had their ear turned warm from the wine and were really hitting it off. Yang Taizin suggested, "We two brothers are really fortunate to be able to meet Father today. Father, why don't you stay a couple of days?" Kyuchuji was just going to answer before his face suddenly froze. "Someone is here for me. No matter what happens, you two stay inside and don't come out, understand?" The two men nodded. Kyuchuji picked up the human head, walked out of the door, jumped up on a tree, and hid among its leaves. Go Zhaotian and Yang Taizin didn't really understand his strange actions. There was no noise whatsoever other than the howling of the wind. After a while, there came faint hoofbeats from the west. Yang Taizin thought, "Father's ear is incredible." Then immediately his thoughts followed, "This father's kung fu is amazing, but if compared with Kusan, who would come out on top?" After another while, the hoofbeats got closer and closer. Finally, about 20 riders, all dressed in black, appeared out of the snow flying in the air. Galloping, they arrived in front of the door. The leader of the group suddenly pulled his horse to a stop and yelled out, "The footprints stop here. Looks like there's just been a fight here." Several people behind him jumped off their horses and inspected the footprints in the snow. The head of the pack ordered, "Search the house." 2 more men jumped off their horse to knock on the door. Suddenly an object came flying from the trees, hitting one of them on the head. The object was thrown with such an incredible amount of force that it smashed the skull of the man. The other men all started to yell and scream as several men surrounded the tree. One man picked up the object that was thrown and yelled in shock, "It's the Excellency Wang's head." The leader pulled out a saber and let out a loud yell. Quickly 10 or so men surrounded the tree. He gave out another command and 5 men whipped out their bow and shot 5 arrows toward Kyuchuji. Yang Taizin picked up his spear and was just about to go outside and help when Go Zhaotian grabbed him and whispered, "Father told us not to go out. Besides, if he starts having trouble with how many of them there are, then it still won't be too late for us to help." Just as he finished, an arrow came screaming down from the top of the tree. Kyuchuji had dodged 4 of the arrows and caught the last one, then he just threw the arrow back down like a flying weapon. With a scream of "Ah!" one of the men in black was hit and fell off his horse. His body rolled into a bush and stopped. Kyuchuji pulled out his sword and jumped down. The sword just started flashing when 2 men were hit. The leader shouted out, "Damn Taoist! It's you! Shaw, Shaw, Shaw!" He fired out 3 short bows, then his ride came forth as his saber came slashing through the wind. Kyuchuji's sword continued to flash in the snow as 2 more men were hit and fell off their horse. Yang Taizin was awestruck, knowing that even if he practiced kung fu for 10 more years, he still would not be able to even see the sword clearly, much less fight back. If Kyuchuji wasn't holding back just then, he would have been a dead man by now. Kyuchuji moved as if carried by the wind, and now is fighting the rider with the saber. That man's saber skill is not bad. Each move, be it a parry or a slash, came out ferociously. After fighting for a bit more, Go Zhaotian and Yang Taizin both figured out that Qu Chuji was prolonging their duel on purpose as to be able to use openings and breaks to pick off the other opponents. He is doing this in order to be able to kill all the enemies, for if the leader was killed, the rest might just all turn and run for their lives, making it impossible to kill all of them. After some more fighting, there were only 6 or 7 of them left. The leader knew he was not good enough, so he turned and tried to escape. Qu Chuji reached out with his left hand and grabbed the horse's tail. With a slight pull, his body jumped off of the ground. Before even landing on the back of the horse, his sword had already penetrated the man's back all the way out of his chest. Qu Chuji threw down the body, grabbed a hold of the reins, and started to chase the others. Silver-colored iron horseshoes danced in the snow as silver flashes of his sword danced in the air. Amidst the screams, one body followed another onto the ground. Blood stained a ground that was covered in pure white snow into a deep red. Qu Chuji stopped and looked around. Seeing only several riderless horses running off, he laughed heartily. Turning to the 2 men by the door, he waved and said, "How did you guys like that?" Go Zhaotian and Yang Taizin had just opened the door and walked out, so they have not completely calmed down from what they just witnessed. Go Zhaotian asked, "Father, who are these people?" Qu Chuji replied, "We'll know when we search their bodies." Go Zhaotian searched the body of that saber-using man and found an official document. Turned out to be an order from that very magistrate Zhao that pretended to be a dog saying that the ambassador from Jin has ordered that the government troops and Jin troops work together to catch the man that murdered Wang Daokun as soon as possible. Go Zhaotian's rage just came on when Yang Taizin yelled out. In his hand was some tags found on the bodies of some other men. The tags were written in New Zen language. It meant that in this group of men, there were several Jin soldiers. Go Zhaotian spoke up, "The enemy soldiers can do whatever they want, including capturing and killing, within our borders, and our Sung officials are actually obeying orders from their ambassador. What kind of world is this?" Yang Taizin sighed. Even the Emperor of Great Sung has to refer to himself as an official to the Jin Emperor. So it's no surprise that our officials and generals are all becoming their servants as well. Qu Chuji bitterly said, "We Taoists are supposed to be merciful and benevolent in our hearts and actions. But seeing a bunch of traitors and enemies that do nothing but add to the suffering of our people, I could never be merciful nor benevolent." The 2 other men replied at the same time, "You were right to kill them. They deserve to die."